150,000 plants. The snapshot is we're probably getting around 60% of what the plant count is here.
By the end of the 2010 season, Roper's team destroyed more than $600 million worth of marijuana. And he vows that Kentucky will be the last state ever to legalize pot as just another taxable commodity.
Why would anybody ever consider that legalizing one more drug, especially one that we are winning, why would you ever consider that just for money? Because in the end, you're going to lose. You'll lose.
And that's the fear, that legalizing pot would lead to more people smoking, more crime, and more dangerous drugs. Or would it?
You go to many places like this where people are smoking in the street and the police don't say nothing. And I think it's a good policy.
When we come back, a trip overseas to the most permissive pot culture in the world. And no, it's not Amsterdam. That's next when Marijuana USA returns. Along the streets of Lisbon, the monuments and cathedrals date back centuries. Portugal is a country steeped in tradition and also home to an unlikely policy designed to address a modern drug crisis. In 2001, Portugal became the first country in the world to fully decriminalize the possession of all drugs. Do this in a public square in the U.S. and you could wind up in handcuffs. Here, it barely raises an eyebrow.
You go to many places like this in Lisbon, especially at night, where people are smoking in the street and the police don't say nothing. And I think it's a good policy.
In Portugal, you can smoke pot, shoot up with heroin, or use cocaine, and your punishment is no more severe than a traffic ticket. João Goulão directs Portugal's drug policy and is the chief architect of this strategy.
You took a very innovative, very aggressive, and a lot of people would say very risky step.
Yes, but we felt that we had to change, to make more of the same would not lead us to any place. We have to innovate.
This policy came out of the trauma the country experienced in the 1990s, when it was ravaged by a drug epidemic. In this small nation, as many as 1 out of 100 people were addicted to heroin. In this notorious drug ghetto, thousands of users bought and sold heroin openly every day. But rather than strengthen their drug laws, the Portuguese chose to relax them.
I know a lot of people that are watching the show right now are probably thinking they decriminalized all drugs. Are they crazy?
We are not crazy. We decided to do that because we had to change something. And now we can be positive. It worked.
Dr. Goulão says drug addiction is a disease just like any other, not a matter of weakness, but biology.
In some cases of diabetes, it's a self-inflicted disease like this one.
Still, there's a difference between eating too many cupcakes and shooting yourself with heroin.
Yes, but when you are sick, you must be faced like a patient and treated like that.
Here, instead of going to jail, anyone caught with drugs meets with a panel led by a street-smart counselor like Nuno Capaz, who encourages users to get treatment.
In Portugal, if you want to get treatment, it's possible to do it for free.
Why do I, as a taxpayer, want to pay for your heroin use or his cocaine use or her marijuana use?
If a person needs to be imprisoned because he committed some crime, it will also be your tax money that will be used to imprison that person. And I think it's better to pay for people to get treatment and eventually be socially productive again than to put him in jail.
Alexander is a recovering addict who has benefited from the free treatment. He says his drug use started at age 14 when he began smoking pot. By his early 20s, he was addicted to heroin. Today, he can hold on to his job as a broadcast engineer without the taint of a drug conviction.
I don't think somebody goes to a bar, drinks a couple of drinks, it's a criminal. So I don't think I'm going to smoke a joint makes me a criminal.
Since the reforms took place, Portugal has seen a decline in the number of teens using marijuana and almost every other category of drugs, especially among the vulnerable 15 to 19-year-old age group. We saw it firsthand at this club scene in Lisbon.
So have you ever used hashish?
No, never.
Why not?
It's bad for us. It's bad.
Today, Portugal's relaxed approach to pot is met with surprisingly little drama. But critics doubt its success and believe it would never work here at home. Gil Kurlikowski, the U.S. drug czar, is flatly opposed to legalizing pot.
If marijuana were to become legal, do we run the risk that young people would start down a slippery slope?
We know that if an illegal substance becomes legal, it becomes more widely available. I've seen the devastation that drugs, including marijuana, can cause in neighborhoods with young people, and I think we need to be smart about how we handle it. I think we need to be as least punitive as possible, but I don't think we want to see it legalized at all.
Yes on 19.
But on the street, the debate rages.
That's Yes on 19, November 2nd.
In California, the birthplace of America's marijuana movement, there's a push to become the first state to legalize pot for recreational use.
So do you think we can count on you to vote yes on Proposition 19 tomorrow?
On the 2010 ballot, the effort was called Proposition 19, an historic campaign led by a successful pot entrepreneur named Richard Lee.
Because one plant's illegal under federal law.
Lee wrote the measure, which proposed that any resident over the age of 21 be allowed to grow, possess, and use small amounts of pot for any reason.
Why let one more genie out of the bottle? You've already legalized tobacco. You've already legalized alcohol.
Alcohol prohibition didn't work, and cannabis prohibition isn't working either. You know, it's hypocritical, unfair, and unjust to lock up people for cannabis while we not only have booze legal, but advertised like soda pop.
Medical marijuana is already legal in California.
The Royal Kush is pretty good, too.
And this Oakland neighborhood may be the unofficial capital of the state's thriving pot culture. Here, Richard Lee runs his cannabis college, called Oaksterdam University.
This is very different from the storefront operation that you guys used to have.
Yeah, this is our new 3-story, 30,000 square foot facility. We've had about 130 classes and over 12,000 students.
The classes at Oaksterdam are unique, teaching students the best techniques for growing and selling marijuana.
If you're growing in a space this size or even double this size, you're not going to need more than 2 lights.
California may be pushing the boundaries, but some, like Senator Dianne Feinstein, are saying enough.
The last thing we need to do is make it easier for drug dealers to increase their consumer base by pushing pot on young people.
In the end, Prop 19 went up in smoke. It failed by a 9% margin.
Is this going to end the chances of legalization of pot in California?
No, I think the fact that we got the debate started and got people thinking about it seriously will help us win in 2012.
The quest to legalize pot may have stalled, but the effort to legitimize it has not. When we come back, a look at marijuana's extreme makeover.
What you're watching before your eyes in the United States is an industry emerging out of the shadows.
That's next in the conclusion of Marijuana USA. Across Colorado, they are springing up like weeds. Pot gardens, like this one, owned by Scott Dura, one of a growing breed of entrepreneurs making the most of the state's new medical marijuana laws. Dura is one of thousands in this fledgling industry finding their way through a thicket of conflicting rules. Staying out of trouble isn't so easy.
I'm at the farm every day, with our plants and everything, and every time someone does knock on the door, your mind goes back to that because you don't know.
Police, search warrant! Police department, search warrant!
In early 2010, police raided a number of grows, including Scott's.
Our first operation was raided And, they went through our front window, and we were totally legitimate. And, it was...
He and his wife, Wanda James, thought they had done everything by the book. No charges were filed, but the experience left them unsettled.
Because it encompasses your life. All of a sudden, you do have people probing in your background and asking you questions and this and that.
To escape the legal limbo, these restaurant owners joined other pot entrepreneurs and lobbied for what most industries try to avoid, to be taxed and regulated.
Okay, Barb, would you tell me about your plants and your patient count?
Matt Cook, with the Colorado Department of Revenue, is the man charged with creating a blueprint for a state-taxed, for-profit marijuana industry.
Questions, a lot of questions out there, huh?
Cook is a former law enforcement officer who's put hundreds of people behind bars for growing and selling pot. Not exactly the first person you'd think of to help legitimize the marijuana industry.
Where do you intend to have any product, medicine at all?
As he meets with thousands of pot pioneers, he's realized there's no fighting this wave.
It's a huge pill for me to swallow because of where I come from. But I'm going to do what's right to ensure that we can regulate the industry.
If he can't beat them, at least he can keep them in line.
We can't issue a license till local governments approved it.
What's driving is the need to get it regulated, to get it under control, to ensure that the medicine that patients are receiving meets quality standards, and to ensure that the black market industries, the cartels, and all the other bad guys out there aren't profiting from it.
What started out as a few vague rules has now become a strict state code of regulation that goes further than any other jurisdiction in the country, beginning with who is allowed to grow and who is allowed to sell.
You cannot have any felonies within the last 10 years. You can have to be able to show years of your tax returns.
There we go. Okay. That looks good.
Everyone involved in the marijuana business, even investors, must be fully licensed, requiring rigorous background checks and steep fees.
Okay. You're all set.
Wanda James and Scott Dura have spent more than $25,000 on application fees alone.
That was a very expensive, it was a 26-page application that wanted everything from your high school diploma to any divorce that you've ever had.
The rules now specify precisely how much medical marijuana can be cultivated and sold. And the state will be keeping a close eye on the industry, literally.
16 cameras covering the entire area and the perimeter.
Every marijuana grow and retail facility is required to install 24-hour live cameras that feed directly to Matt Cook's enforcement office. He's tracing the money and the product from seed to retail. Cook says the new code will be strictly enforced.
Violators will be subject to two kinds of actions. I can fine them up to $100,000 for a violation of the law, and a criminal sanction. We can arrest them and make them go to court.
Do you ever just shake your head and say, oh my God, this is too much regulation?
Every morning, every morning. But I got to tell you, there's a sense of pride in which we go through this because we know that this is just the beginning, and we know that this was going to be difficult, but we were thrilled to be part of the boom of what is happening.
They're just not going to get the consistency that you guys will, and that's
even before the state stepped in. Wanda James and Scott Dura say they made quality control a top priority and had their marijuana tested at an independent laboratory. Full Spectrum is the first facility in Colorado dedicated to testing cannabis for its medicinal and psychedelic qualities. Bob Winicky, the company founder, tests a lot of pot.
But if you're out to dinner or you meet some people at a bar and you tell them what you do for a living, do they say to you, come on?
This probably is not as fun as it sounds at first pass. Everyone thinks that we're a bunch of guys sitting around a table smoking pot and saying, oh, this one's better than this one.
There actually is a science to it. The chemists here analyze the bud for its cannabinoid makeup, which determines what effect it has on the body.
This machine separates the cannabinoids and then reads them and reports the amounts to a computer.
What happened to the days where someone said, gee, this really makes me feel good? Now suddenly they want to test it?
You're watching an industry go from an underground, what I like to call the Wild West days, into a respected, legal, licensed industry. Not since you saw alcohol come out of prohibition has anything similar to this ever happened in this country.